So now that we've heard the President of the United States at least floating the term regime change on social media, I feel like our next guest would have a really interesting perspective to add to that conversation we were just having. Shahin Gobadi is a spokesman for the People's Mojahedin Organization of Iran, which is an opposition party in exile. This is the president's Truth Social post earlier. It hadn't been stated policy, but or I don't know if you think it should be or it should be more limited. What about going about something like that in Iran?
Well, McConnell, I hope you realize that the Iranian people have been having a war with this regime for the past 4 decades. Actually, this regime has imposed war on the Iranian people past 4 decades, as a result of which 120,000 good Iranians have lost their lives standing up for human rights and democracy. So having said this, I think the notion of a regime change is basically the responsibility of the Iranian people and the resistance, and solely their responsibility. And this is what the Iranian people are basically have been striving for. One has to keep in mind that there has been 5 major nationwide uprisings in Iran in the past 7.5 years alone. Each time it gets bigger, more pervasive, more inclusive. I think a lot of your viewers remember back in 2022 and early 2023 when you had this massive uprising. Yes. Basically including the whole 31 provinces in more than 300 cities and towns throughout Iran. And even Gen Zs were involved, in which the resistance units of the People's Mojahedin Organization of Iran, or as you use the acronym MEK, played a key role as the main, pivot for it. So basically the notion that the Iranian people want to get rid of this regime is nothing new. And I think this has never been closer because the regime has never been any weaker and the resistance has never been any stronger. But I have to be very clear. This is solely the responsibility of the Iranian people and the resistance. Actually, Madam Mariam Rajavi, the president-elect of the Iranian resistance, have said this time and again, and she addressed the European Parliament just past Wednesday, and she said, look, this is ultimately the solution, but that does not require any funds from any government, here in the United States, or weapons or boots on the ground. This is solely the task of the Iranian people, and they are up to the challenge.
What might be different, though, or would it be different about an uprising now after what's happened over the last week and especially over the last 24 hours? What might be different in Iran if the people do rise up again?
Well, you have to remember that the people have been very much striving for this. And I think now the regime has been weaker because of what has happened in the last few years. I mean, this is the culmination of years and years of, things piling up. The regime has never been any weaker economically. The Iranian economy is in total, bankruptcy. The people's disenchantment has never been so strong, and the resistance has never been so strong. So yes, the regime is in its last phase. That's quite evident, and it does not have any strategic, basically, assets to go to. After all these uprisings, the regional, proxies got a real, shellacking in the last year and a half alone. And this was climaxed in the overthrow of the Bashar Assad, which was the linchpin of the regime's, regional policy for the last 4 decades. So in that case, yes, the regime has never been any weaker, and the prospects for change has never been any stronger. And it should be very clear that when the regime goes, there will not be any chaos in Iran, because I know there is a lot of concern that, okay, if the mullahs are out, there will be chaos. The reason is, actually, if one goes back, this narrative that if the mullahs are out, there will be chaos is one that the mullahs have perpetuated over the years to prevent a firm policy. The reason is there's a viable alternative out there in the form of National Council of Resistance of Iran, a coalition of the democratic oppositions, which are both anti-Shah, which was the former dictator, and the current theocracy. It has a clear-cut program called the 10-point plan. It has an identifiable leader in Madam Mariam Rajavi, and her plan calls for suppression of government and religion, and abolishment of death penalty, calls for a non-nuclear Iran, mutual amicable relationship with the rest of the world, and total gender equality.
Right.
And this has been supported by.
Right. Let's play this out then. So if what you're saying is true, what's like a hypothetical timeline of the overthrow of the regime and the new one that rises up? Like, how do you actually see it playing out? What would actually happen?
Well, I'm sure it will come with another uprising. As I said, once again, there has been 5 uprisings in the last 7.5 years alone, and there are all indications that another one is in the making. And as I said, this is the main concern of the regime's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, and his retinue, that the enemy within will basically unseat the regime. And as I was about to say, this 10-point plan of Madam Mariam Rajavi has been basically supported by the majority members of the U.S. House of Representatives in a bipartisan way. Actually more than 230 of them have joined. The same with a lot of U.S. senators, again, in a bipartisan way, the majority of the British House of Commons. So there is a growing consensus that, yes, there is a viable democratic alternative there. And this is what the world should know. And I think that's a key game changer.
Are you as optimistic as you've ever been about this, or that it could actually happen?
Well, obviously, we have always been optimistic, but as I said, given everything that has happened in the last few years and in the last few months, yes, the optimism is very much more than ever before. This is not a concept anymore. It's a reality. And I think the sooner the world comes to realization of this fact, the policy should be shifted accordingly. As Madam Rajavi said today, Khamenei should basically leave now, and Iran should be ready for peace. We think an Iran which is peace-loving, in a good relationship with the rest of the world, is very much within reach. And this is not a dream at all. It's very tangible. But in terms of policy, we think, and we have said this for the last 2 decades, that the policy should neither be appeasement or should be a foreign war. The solution is a regime change by the Iranian people and the resistance. And I think the sooner this is realized, the better off the whole world would be, and the process of change will be expedited.
Shahin Gobadi, we thank you for your perspective. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.